Robin, hi, can you hear us? We were looking for if you had some feedback from your workshops, if that's okay.
Yeah, can you hear me there now, Robert?
Yeah, we can hear you perfectly. Thanks very much. So we'll just, if there was any kind of quick thoughts of what came out from your workshop, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll jump in, Robert. Obviously, we'll write up the notes properly afterwards and distribute it to everybody. But I think we were trying to come up with the solution to solve digital education and training for the whole construction sector. And I suppose a lot of the conversation where we have representatives from construction companies, large and small, and from the design community and specialist contractors as well. So we've quite a nice mix here in Waterford and some great feedback. But I think we can't do everybody. We have to prioritize. And I think a lot of the ideas is to try and focus on problems that the industry has at the moment. We already have a lot of education and training courses in the country, but maybe if we're going to get industry to identify some problems and have some problem-based training or challenge-based training, that was one of the ideas that came up with here. Also, the idea of focusing on champions, trying to get champions within companies to be, if we get them engaged in education and training, they can then become lighthouses or pillars within their own companies and drive on in terms of education and training. So these are just some of the ideas we've come up with here so far, but we'll try and formalize the notes afterwards and circulate to everybody.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Thanks very much for everybody to attend the regional events down in Waterford. So thanks. And I'll move on to, is David Burke there available?
Yeah, hello, Robert.
Hi, David.
Hi,
I suppose just if there was any headline findings or anything there from our Galway regional event.
Yeah, sure. Just first, I'd like to thank everybody and extend my thanks from the attendees here as well. So yeah, so we had some interesting chats here. There was a lot around the area of contracts and embedding digital construction into contracts. I think a lot of that came from the background of the attendees here. So no more than Robert said there, we'll get our notes together and disseminate our findings out to everybody once that's
Brilliant.
That's been finalized. Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks very much for that. And now I suppose we're going down to Cork. Hi, Joe. Can you come back with your findings?
Hi, Robert, and good afternoon, everyone. Here in Cork, we looked at Pillar 1, which is leadership and culture change, and we had a very interesting discussion. Again, like the others, we will write up the notes and reflect on them and submit them. But clearly, for culture change, considered to be a real challenge for the industry. And we identified, for example, incentivization in different ways, which I think is very important to allow the industry to progress in this area, and perhaps to develop a series of, I suppose, demonstrating exemplar projects. We have different ideas on how we might demonstrate them, but I think particularly important to show the industry what can be done and where we can go. In terms of Pillar 3, again, we had a very substantial discussion on this particular pillar and how best to deliver from the pillar for the good of industry in terms of the database in particular, and what should be in the database and how it should be set up in a way that will be user-friendly and valuable and useful to industry. So from our point of view, Robert, we've had a very good discussion here this morning, and we'll put the notes together and we'll submit them to contribute to the overall development of the project.
Thanks a million, Joe, and I'd like to thank everybody that came to our Cork event as well. So now we're just going to get feedback here from our Dublin tables. So Janice, if you want to.
Thanks so much, Robert. So the table that I'm working on is Pillar 5, and we had a fantastic discussion. So the first question we discussed was the understanding of the circular economy. And it's no longer about recycled content, it's retaining value of our assets, so keeping them in use at their highest value. Then this sparked off a conversation, what is value and sustainability? And we talked about social, environmental, carbon and financial. And we almost forgot about the financial, which shows the shift in thinking in recent years. So then what are the main sustainability requirements on projects? So we're looking at carbon, habitats, biodiversity, and it's all to do with weighting. And Aidan shared a fantastic example of a multi-criteria analysis where the project manager was able to place emphasis on social value, community value, biodiversity value, and financial was just a part of the decision-making process on the project. In terms of digital requirements on projects, we identified it varies significantly with assets. Single stream assets such as mechanical engineering can have, or a data center or a warehouse building can have really sophisticated BIM requirements, but a complex multidisciplinary infrastructure project may be, I suppose, lagging behind or have more complexity, and the requirements vary. So our last three questions were around digital requirements on projects, digital processes and tools, and how digitalization can address sustainability. And the answer to all three were quite similar, and it's supporting users. It's alignment for the various different stakeholders, the users of the systems, the users of the built environment, and integration of standards, for example, and process guidelines, which might be tiered. Large projects might have more complex requirements, and smaller projects might have less complex requirements. And to enable SMEs to thrive, I suppose, simplicity of those guidelines and access to the data.
Thanks. Thanks very much for that feedback. It was very, very interesting feedback from yours. We're going to go over to pillar 4, digital.
Digital procurement. Yeah, I've been abandoned by the advocates actually. So yeah, so just some feedback on the actual workshop environment, Rob. It was a little difficult to hear everyone around the table because obviously the other tables were so close and so on. And but so again, we'll have to provide the feedback, gather our feedback. So at a later date. But so Wahib from UCD will be helping us to gather that. Look, I mean, in regard to do we need such a framework in Ireland? Absolutely yes. When you look at the results of the survey, there's unanimous, need for this amongst the recipients of the survey. There was some talk about dropping the B from the BIM and labeling it more on, and that is really the trajectory that a lot of international jurisdictions are taking. The compelling argument for and against such a framework, I think we didn't really dwell on that. We just felt that that argument was there. There was a bit of discussion around, well, what is a framework? Well, if we just copy some other jurisdictions, it's a structure intended to support the use of building information modeling, other technologies to realize improved project outcomes. So really but the discussion seemed to surround broadening it more. What became very obvious in our discussions is, while we had, I think it was 12 people around the table, 17 people on the pillar, it's not fully formed. That pillar is not fully formed yet. We don't have public people at the table. We need them at the table. And what can we learn from other jurisdictions? Well, I just provided a little bit of feedback on that. Number one, any of the jurisdictions we've looked at, they have public leadership as a foundation. That's the first thing. Second thing they have is they have a collaborative framework, a cooperative framework built on 3 pillars: ISO standards, guidelines, and regulation. We don't have any in Ireland just yet. So we need to fix that. In other words, and by the way, also what's interesting as well is that not all countries are mandating this. And does that make them any worse, what they do? No, it doesn't. The Australians haven't mandated this. Many countries have not gone down that regulatory route. And there's a sound reason for that also. Set the standard and the industry should follow. We're not entirely clear on the components of the framework, other than they seem to like the diagram that was up there and the 7 points. And maybe we should start number 1 and work our way around there. And so I think a very useful conversation, but there was so much comment. I know, Wahib, you had some difficulty capturing everything. So we're going to get people to fill in a little form for us after the event so we can capture things more clearly. But it was a very positive conversation. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Alan. I'm going to go backwards and go into table 2 before we go to table 1. So Barry, would you like to?
Thanks, Rob. I'll just give a very brief overview of what we were discussing on the table here. And it's interesting, Alan, with Alan's pillar, because it's going to be integral that the standards pillar and the procurement pillar are side by side moving forward from next year onwards. So the first question that we tried to investigate, and the good thing about having such a small group was that everyone kind of got to give their opinion and their oversight, and we got some fantastic insights. And David's asked the same questions down in Galway, so we have some good information to analyze. So we asked what was the greatest challenge you've encountered in standards adoption to date, and I suppose just to summarize that in a couple of words, it seems to be the client, or at the start of the project, not really knowing what they're looking for, not understanding how to get there, what information is required, what process to follow, and ultimately not having the foresight or the understanding that to, I suppose, see the complete picture. So there's requirement there in that regard needed from our perspective and from I think the industry's perspective to put in place a potential vehicle in regard to providing that guidance for the client. So kind of clear, concise requirement at national level in regard to standards applied and management from the start of the project. And that's the start of the project, because a lot of what the table is saying is that it's nearly at the end of the project or the midway of the project, actually information is starting to be understood, what's required, what standardized approach is needed, what classifications. And then sometimes that is resulting in the prescription of too much data, which is kind of resulting in even files being too large to be used, and they're actually requesting information that isn't actually practical. We asked what type of standards are important on your project, and Mary outlined that the ICMS standards are coming down the line as well, and that we have to kind of keep that in play from the perspective of QS. We also are seeing 9.1650 prescribed across a lot of projects. Uniclass, COBie, IFC parameters needs a little bit more explanation, understanding. Some kind of public sector bodies are doing it, but we need a further kind of guidance in that particular area. And in some instances, PAS is still been seen within the industry as a key document, which is, I think that's down to the education aspect, which hopefully the pillar will kind of start to target, where we can kind of say, look, obviously PAS has been replaced by ISO 9650. And crucially, we asked, and I think the most important question is, what practical solutions would you like to see from the project, and ultimately what will constitute success for the pillar? And that's what we want to know, is that what legacy can we leave at the end of year 5 that you would turn around and say, yeah, digital pillar has done its job and the money's been well spent, and they're walking away after making an impact. And I think it's hard to summarize what that is, but it's definitely coming back to providing a clear, concise, focused pathway to provide information through a project from the start to the beginning, with no ambiguity in between that, and providing the guidance that's required in order to achieve that. And it seems to be coming back quite consistently to the client and that kind of area. So that's some of the findings that we had today.
Thanks a million, Barry, for them findings on digital standards. So finally, last but not least.
Thanks, Robert. Sorry, my name is Roisin Murphy. I'm the co-chair of the Digital Leadership and Cultural Change pillar. We had a useful discussion amongst the table, answering 4 key questions. What do we envisage are the key challenges in leading the cultural change? And ultimately is the discussion centered around getting to 2 key groups, SMEs and clients predominantly. And one of the key challenges is the communication and articulation and the proof as to why they need to engage and embark on this digital journey. What's going to be in it for them? How do we measure the benefits to SMEs? How do we measure benefits to clients? What's involved? How much is it going to cost them? But equally, how much is it going to save them? So we really have to demystify the process and reach out and engage with SMEs and clients in particular, and in so doing potentially use exemplar projects through the public sector. And we have some good public sector representation on our own pillar, and using the public sector good practice as a way of communicating the benefits and potential savings as well. So the demystification of digitalisation, supported by evidence and data, and I think data came up a few times in our discussion in terms of the criticality of it. In terms of the challenges, how we can overcome them, collaboration, critically important, the exemplars, but also incentivising and using existing funding mechanisms by which to incentivise participation, incentivise engagement, potentially through the education and training pillar as well, with looking at digital literacy. But also using existing networks such as regional skills, local authorities, in particular when we're looking at the construction sector, with the vast majority of construction firms being micro firms with fewer than 5 employees. We had some discussion as to how best we can reach those particular that particular cohort, and trying to be innovative in how to do that, even through things like SafePass, for example, where look at existing registers, because obviously quantifying and accessing the micro firms in particular is a challenge. But we had some discussion about that. The practical solutions required for of Build Digital in order to deliver this. Well, there was general support for the toolkits that are part of the deliverables for Pillar 1. The gap analysis and the implementation toolkits to provide a bespoke, tailored solution for SMEs, for clients, and then potentially the development of a mentoring system through the support, and we'd have to engage with professional bodies in particular to identify potential and suitable mentors to provide that bespoke solution. And again, looking at existing funding streams, perhaps through Enterprise Ireland, leveraging things like innovation vouchers, the BIM Enable, the BIM Implement, in order to do this. And again, linking back to upskilling and our digital leadership and cultural change pillar. The most important focus, I think the bottom line, if I'm synopsizing this correctly, is mainstreaming the process, identifying the potential cost savings, identify the benefits, and in so doing, mainstreaming, demystifying the process, and ultimately, I think we concluded that it's our job to go to our key stakeholders, it's our job to go to the SMEs and the clients, and not necessarily wait for them to come to us. And I think again, just we link in with our colleagues down in MTU who've also addressed similar questions.
Thanks very much, Roisin. That was a great summary as well. But I'd like to thank everybody for coming here to DCC, and also all the people that came to the regional events. It's very important that your participation to make these events a success. So look, I'd like to thank everybody, and now I'll call the session to a close.